Hello and welcome to All in Motion. I am your host, Jake. This is episode 34. She's back by demand. This young woman has been on the show before, and we are happy to have her back. Very powerful episode as we celebrate and honor Black History Month. She goes in and shares why this month is very special to her and the rest of us in America. Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, Jackie Winter. Hey, Jackie. Welcome back to All Motion. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well. So I know, appreciate you taking the time to, it's been, I think, about over a year and a few months since we did our original first interview with you. So again, thank you for your time and thank you for sitting down with All Motion. And we wanted to know everything is good with you?
I'm alive. I can walk on my 2 feet. So you know what? Life is good.
Okay, well, that's great. I'm glad to hear you're good. So, wanted to share, some people that we want to talk about Black History Month, and I know you cool talking about it. So, this is a big month, powerful month for Black and African Americans. What is the month throughout you growing up and in your life, like what does it mean to you and your friends and family?
A lot. First of all, I am an African American, and there's a big difference between the description of an African American and a Black American. And unfortunately, in this country called America, they confuse it, and it really needs to be defined. When you say Black Americans is defined as Black people who are descendants of and emancipated into 466 plus years of U.S. chattel slavery and Jim Crow. African Americans are someone like me, born in America of Black immigrant parents. So there lies a huge difference. So as an African American whose parents immigrated legally to this country during Jim Crow, I'm forever grateful because without the Black American blood soaked on this American soil for those 466 plus years, without the innate characteristic of resistance against white supremacy and Jim Crow and the fight for civil rights, my parents would not have been able to come here legally to have the level of opportunities that their respective countries could not give them. And having said that, I have two parents that raised their three kids, that we were going to know everything beyond what the school teaches you about Black history, like we were going to dig real deep. And for my parents, who, unlike an idiot like Emmanuel Acho, who thinks he can just speak on behalf of Black Americans, my parents were not that arrogant. They knew what their limitations were, gave us the best they could do, a varied education on Black history that is most necessary for us to move along in the world. And they exposed me to the teachings of Elijah Muhammad. My parents, my father particularly, brought me to Madison Square Garden many years ago as a little girl when Farrakhan would come to New York. It was a way for him to allow me to listen to a perspective that was important. We were at the Thanksgiving table. My parents believed that the Pilgrim, the whole story about the Pilgrim, had nothing really to do with us and nothing to do with Black Americans. And so they were determined that what they would do to heighten our level of appreciation for the contribution of Black Americans in this country during Thanksgiving, prior to eating dinner, we had to report or at least share a Black American and something profound that they contributed. And that's where we gave thanks.
I think it's pretty interesting the fact that you learned from your family instead of like society or, culture, things, if that makes sense.
Yeah. My parents, particularly my father, wanted us to have a complete understanding of being Black in America. And my father always said, and I think I shared that with you in my first interview with you, is that my father always said, never forget who you are.
Right, exactly.
Because when you start forgetting who you are is when you start running into problems. Right. I.e., Don Lemon right now on CNN. You know what I mean?
Right.
He's Black first. He's not gay first. He's not married to a white man first. He's not over 50 first. He's Black first. And my father always believed, do not forget who you are. You are Black first, and they will remind you when you start acting like you forgot. So that was, my family. And typical of an immigrant, Black immigrants who came here during Jim Crow. The Black immigrants from Africa and Caribbean coming into this country in the last 20 years is a whole nother level that I just don't understand. And like I mentioned, Emmanuel Acho, he is someone who gets under my skin because he thinks he can speak on behalf of Black Americans and feel that he's better at talking to white people about Black American pain and Black American experiences. And his hubris makes him out to be a damn fool, and he speaks off code 98% of the time. I was so proud of Van Lathan the other day, who put him in his goddamn place the way he was supposed to the other day and shut him down. So, you've got this new breed of Black immigrants coming in from Africa and the Caribbean that have the most low disdain for Black Americans. What they don't seem to realize is that they run to this country, whether most of them illegally, and can even get as illegal immigrants the benefit, housing, food, education, things that their own country can't give them. They come here, I don't know where they think it comes from. They might think it comes from dropping out of the sky like they're used to in their respective countries. No, it came from the blood soaked in this American soil, from Black Americans who fought for their rights, Black Americans who labored for free, forced labor, their enslavement, they came from that blood. So when you understand that, you get a whole new perspective and appreciation for Black American history, the true Black American history. It's not the bullshit they teach you in school.
Right. I'm glad you broke it down like that, because the 5 Memphis police officers that were involved in the murder of Tyre Nichols, and it's just kind of like a 2-part. So that, and you growing up in New York City, and just wanted your thoughts on that situation, but then also growing around police, obviously in New York, and what your thoughts are about, it seems like it's out of control.
Well, the 5+ cops that slaughtered Tyre Nichols intentionally obviously were Black. White supremacy comes in various forms. It's no longer a white man in a sheet riding a horse with a torch in their hand. White supremacy today comes in all colors, all nationalities. It comes in various forms. And if you didn't believe me, you could for sure read the book by Charles Blow, a best-selling author and contributing editor to the New York Times. Charles Blow had a book out about 2 years ago called The Devil You Know. And in that book, he says that white supremacy has an uncanny ability to reinvent itself, reestablish itself through various races, religion, beliefs, everything. I mean, that incident that happened in that church in Orange County, I think it was an Asian church, was an Asian man. He was
Right.
roommate with a man who is half black from San Francisco that had some anti-black, anti-Jew militia he was the head of, and they were roommates. So it comes in different forms. The gentleman that tried to assassinate a couple of Hasidic Jews on the Pico Robertson area last week in L.A. He's an Asian guy. This is what's going on. As far as the five cops, you see, I don't know if you or you and your audience have ever read the book about Uncle Tom's Cabin. I'm not sure if you read about it, but by Harriet Beecher Stowe. But when you look at it, you had the massa, and you had his two overseers that were black overseers. And the more vicious they were, the overseers, the more vicious the overseers were to the slaves on the plantation, the more pleased the massa was. And is completely connected to these five officers, because they, in their mindset, are blue. And what they see their fellow blue officers get away with, they thought that they would be pleasing their peers in their police department. And what they did to Tyree is what happens to predominantly black men by police, by blue, all the time. The only difference is that these five guys were black, but that doesn't mean anything. That was a form of white supremacy by black men wearing blue. That they wore blue, they thought that it would, when you hear it in the video, they were trying to, because they knew that the camera was on, they were trying to, explain why they did what they did, which everything they described on that body cam did not happen, but they were talking it through because that would be their excuse. And it bodes true, because when a part of their report was released, and what they wrote on the report is completely incongruent to what we saw on the video, except for the part where they tried to, and excuse my language, but people would appreciate it, nigga-splain what did not happen as an excuse to get by and to get over on this man's life. Well, it didn't work out. They are a part of a history of slave patrols. And I don't know if people understand what, slave patrols are, but it was created in the early 1700s. And their mission established a system of terror against the enslaved Black Americans. And these slave patrols were eventually replaced by militia-style groups who were empowered to control and deny access to equal rights to freed slaves after the emancipation. And relentlessly and systematically, they enforced Black Code, the Black Codes. And these Black Codes were very strict local and state laws that regulated and restricted access to labor, to wages, voting rights, general freedoms for the formerly enslaved Black Americans. And after the 14th Amendment, the Black Codes were replaced with Jim Crow, because you see, white supremacy doesn't stop. They're constantly trying to figure out how to hold Black people behind. So after the 14th Amendment, when Black Codes were replaced by Jim Crow laws, that legalized segregation, and then used police to enforce and exert excessive brutality on Black Americans who violated any Jim Crow laws. Like, commonly they were sundown towns. where after 6 p.m., after sundown, if you were black and walking on the street, you'd be lynched. Things like that. Nothing much has changed in the blue system as far as the way in which they go about terrorizing black people. I think whoever created the term defunding the police was wrong. It's not defunding the police, it's reallocating their large budget by taking away, reallocating some of their funds and putting it into a system of community around the country where certain aspects of community could be more effective than the brutality, the systematic brutality that the Blue Lives Matter has built their system on, their white supremacist system. And so again, just because these men were black, it's not a black on black crime. It's white supremacy once again. What they did was use the Sambos to exert the brutality to satisfy their massa. What they did not realize, again, as I said at the top of this conversation, is that although they thought they were blue first, they're black first, because they were fired and charged before we even knew the crime happened. And their faces were plastered all over the media, unlike what we see commonly when a white cop is involved. So, they are getting what Paul Mooney, the late great comedian Paul Mooney, termed that they're getting their nigga wake-up card. And I predict that they'll probably all be in for life, if not 60 years, as they should. And hopefully when they go to jail, I hope and pray to God that they stay in there long enough and then be murdered in that jail. And that's what I said, and I said what I said. And that's it.
No, I appreciate it. What changes could be made, and what could police departments in the U.S. Do to make changes?
I think they need to do somebody needs to come in and do a very extensive sweep on their background and a heavy, extensive psychological, mental development. They need to have a mental tune-up once every 2 months, because these men and women are afraid of black people. They hate black people. They get this badge and they think that they could do what they did to Tyree and many others and get away with it. They need to hire, what was that Kyle Rittenhouse, whatever his name is, that kid that shot up those 2 people during George Floyd and got away with it. I mean, he's the average police department's prototype. This little nobody, rural town, lack of exposure, one-horse town kid who has a badge and thinks now, Yahoo, I can go and put a bullet in a nigga's ass and get away with it. That kind of mentality needs to go.
Being a woman, being African American, how were you able to deal with some of those situations in corporate America?
Well, I shared in that first interview a while ago, about 2 years ago, maybe, or a year and a half ago, where corporate America, I feel, as far from a black woman's perspective and a black person's perspective, that you have an expiration date. If you have that in the back of your head, you move differently, you choose differently, and you always have a plan B, C, D, and E. And I would say to anyone going into corporate America today that make sure you have an expiration date, like in the back of your head, because what's good for you is definitely not going to be good for anybody else, and vice versa. That you get all that you can out of corporate America and see if it can apply to your entrepreneurship, if it can benefit your entrepreneurship, or get into a corporate job where they're paying for advanced education. And because if you know that you have a goal in mind and you can see where that job is a launch pad to something that is going to better you as an entrepreneur in the future, go for it. But if you go in thinking that you're going to climb the corporate ladder, that's a great goal, and you may just do that. But you might have to sell your soul for it, and you might have to internalize a lot of macro and microaggressions. And if you can manage that mentally, perfect. A lot can't. No average human being can. So I would say get as much as you can out of corporate America and invest your money into real estate so that if you want to walk off a job because it's bullshit, that you have a couple of revenue streams that you don't need them. And that's where I say a successful black corporate executive is defined as that. You can get up and leave and not have to, and you don't need them. That's a success.
All right. Appreciate it. I wanted to touch on social media. Do you think social media plays a negative impact on a rhetoric of, influencing hate?
Oh, no doubt about it. I think the media really does a number on it. In fact, it's so funny. There's this whole play with this anti-Asian hate, and that black people target the Asians. Why they had to stand on our black shoulders to become a protected class, something that Black Americans have been asking for 40 plus years and still haven't gotten it. And, this play on it's black people, why there's an anti-Asian hate. There's more black people with crime and blah, 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 blah. And statistics show something completely opposite. And then just a couple of days ago, NBC News came out with an article that said that, despite viral images that show people of color as anti-Asian perpetrators, the big picture has been missed. It says that, with the news reports and social media perpetuating the idea that the anti-Asian violence is committed by mostly black people, there's an analysis that shows the majority of the perpetrators are white, which the average black person already knows. However, they used black people, the Asian community used black people because everybody uses black people as a whipping stick to get what they want as a play off of civil rights that we fought for, and got to get something that black people have been asking for decades. And funny enough, it's a part of the George Floyd bill that Congress still cannot vote for. Because you see, Black American pain, Black American despair, Black American lynching is everybody else's profit. Every white person and every immigrant that comes to this country. In capitalism, you have to have someone at the bottom in order to capitalize on. And the Asian community masterfully have capitalized on the fact that everybody shits on Black Americans and blame Black Americans for damn near everything in order to, I think her name was Congresswoman Grace Meng out of Queens, New York. She was able to masterfully use Black people as the stepping stone in order to get Asians to be a protected class, because the perpetrators in most of the anti-Asian violence is Black, which is untrue. Between the media and social media and the anti-Asian hate community, the AAPI, they masterfully were able to get that. And within 65 days of the Kamala Harris and Biden administration leveraging her Asian, Southeast Asian, heritage or lineage, they were able to push that forward and get that done. And I think it's bullshit. And so thank God that NBC News was able to, report something that Black people already knew.
Well, last thing here, what advice would you give young Black women and men today on how to deal with just racism that still happens, unfortunately? They're just starting out in their career. You kind of already appreciate it. You answered it with, your experience with corporate.
Well, as I said in the middle of this, that they completely understand that they are walking on thin ice in corporate America, that they will see right through you no matter how many degrees you have. And if they do give you a bone, believe me, you're walking on thin ice. You may have an expiration date. And just, and besides that, as just, Black people doing the most mundane things and being profiled and everything, I strongly suggest Black men and women to, look at the laws in your state and get a gun, protect yourself because, and I've been reading that there's been a rise in Black people around the country going and getting themselves, weapons and
license to carry,
licenses to carry legally and stuff
Right.
like that.
Right.
Practice because you just never know. You have to be ready for prime time all the time. We have to be on our guard all the time. And that's a mental infliction in and of itself. But the reality is that we have to be ready. And, and this saying is that, in order to stay ready, you got to get ready. And that's basically it. I will leave you with something that I've done in the last couple of years. So I will leave you and we'll end with this. And these are all the people that were slaughtered based on police brutality. And I say this in memoriam. So I will begin with Freddie Gray, Dante Perez Jones, Laquan McDonald, Randy Cox, Tyree Nichols, Sandra Bland, Philandro Castile, Alton Sterling, Botham Jean, Jayland Walker, Terrence Crutcher, Emanuel E.J. Fitzgerald Bradford Jr., Byron Williams, Pamela Turner, Devonna Walker, Sinzay Reed, Eric Cole, Jordan Davis, Keenan Anderson, Cameron Lamb, Trayvon Martin, Sean Bell, Laden Boykins, Rasheem Carter, Kendrick Johnson, Breonna Taylor, James Brissett, Ronald Madison, Tamir Rice, Stephon Clark, Ahmaud Arbery, Michael Brown, Elijah McClain, George Floyd, Aiyana Jones, Oscar Grant, Leona Hale, Amadou Diablo, Jalen Randall, Michael Stewart, Magdiel Sanchez, Rakia Boyd, Bakari Henderson, Patrick Loyola, Khalif Browder, Walter Scott, Stephen Lawrence, Timothy Russell, Melissa Williams, Jonathan Farrell, Ramarley Graham, Emmett Till, Andre Hill, Dante Wright, Javier Ambler, Michael Ramos, Amir Locke, Clement Carlos Pickney, Cynthia Graham Hurd, Gavin Cato, Kira Dixon Johnson, Susie Jackson, Ethel Lee Lance, DePayne Middleton, Tawanza Sanders, Daniel L. Simmons, Sharonda Coleman Singleton, Myra Thompson, Latasha Harlins, Tatiana Jefferson, Henry Glover, Lavina Johnson, Addie Mae Collins, Carol Rosamond Robertson, Cynthia Dion Wesley, Aaron Salter Jr., Ruth Whitfield, Roberta Drury, Margus Morrison, Andre McNeil, Geraldine Talley, Catherine Massey, Pearl Young, Celestine Cheney, Hayward Patterson, Corinne Gaines, Christopher Dormer. These are the Martinville Seven. Joe Henry Hampton, Francis DeSalle Grayson, John Claiborne Taylor, James Luther Hairston, Howard Lee Hairston, Booker T. Milner, Frank Hairston Jr., Ronald Green, Cameron Jackson. And I will say that in Martavius Banks, and because of him, Memphis put a police policy, to have to turn your body camera on. He's alive, barely. At the time, barely alive. He's alive now. But I have to tip my hat to him because of him in Memphis, of an incident that he had. The law now is, the policy is now they have to turn on their body camera. And also a mention of Carriol Horn, a former American police officer, a Black woman who was fired from the Buffalo Police Department and lost her pension after she stopped her fellow partner and officer from chokeholding a handcuffed suspect in 2006. Long story short, she was punished by her peers. She was stripped of any pension, and for years, over a decade, did not get a dime until George Floyd, when that happened. And she was able to go back to court and leverage what happened to George Floyd to turn around the judgment against her. And she was able to, after 2 decades almost, get the pensions all caught up, get all her benefits and everything. So I wanted to mention those 2 people. But I collected these names of people that were victims of police violence and dehumanization and terrorism. And so I wanted to leave with that.
No, I appreciate you, and I appreciate your time, and very powerful. So I appreciate you being honest and vulnerable and sharing. Lastly, anything else you would like to say, or like we do always do, people allowed to reach out to you? If anybody wants to reach out to you?
Yeah, they can reach out to me anytime. Lastly, I just want to bring attention to the Mallory family that is in the El Paso County of Colorado, husband and wife ranchers who bought, I believe, about 1,000 acres of land. They always dreamt about being ranchers, and they are still, but they are victims of domestic terrorism, including the sheriff of that county, of El Paso County. They have had their cows eviscerated, which means gutted. They've had another rancher that they hired shot at. They've had their land infiltrated with white supremacists who've come onto their properties, pulling out their AR weapons against them, claiming that this land doesn't belong to them, that they should have bought the land instead of the Mallorys. This has been going on for years. It reached an ugly head when, doing just a mundane thing, Mr. Mallory was driving his truck and they pulled him over and arrested him for quote unquote trespassing, which they could not explain where he trespassed, and held him in jail without bail, which was illegal. And so a collective effort, talk about social media, we used it in a positive way to raise money through Hawk Newsom out of New York, and a political activist, and also the Geronimo Pratt Gun Club. Those 2 entities raised money and got together to have a Black militia go down and protect those people and demand to get Mr. Mallory out of jail, which they did. And what I think the county of El Paso did not expect was grassroots brought this to a national attention, and all eyes are on them right now and what they've done. When you see the pictures of how they eviscerated their animals, and the stories of domestic terrorism, and these are 2 veterans, Marines as well, Black patriots that are the victims of domestic terrorism from white supremacists. So I want to bring attention to that because, we also have a congressman. We talk about the difference between Black American and these brand new African Americans. You have, what's his name? Congressman Joe Nagoon, I think his name is, and Eritrean American, who we have been calling his office, sending him messages. It all fell on deaf ears. If we had to depend on him, those Mallorys might have been dead. And this is the difference when you bring people in, and I have nothing against immigrants, but you better damn well know that when we bring something like this to your attention, it should be on the top of your list. You know why? Because you would not have been able to be in this country to become a congressman if it wasn't for Black Americans and their fight. So I'm happy to say that for now, the Mallorys are alive. I believe that the white supremacists in that county did not expect the national attention. And now we are bringing an outside investigation into the whole system over there so that we can protect Mr. and Mrs. Mallory and let them do what their lifelong dream was, and that's to be ranchers and to live free. So I want to bring that to anyone's attention who is interested, and you can donate money. You can go on Hawk Newsom's Instagram or go on the Geronimo Pratt Gun Club and or just Google it and you'll get that information. So that's what I want to leave you with.
All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate you. I always I love doing these interviews with you because there's no holds bar. You know what I mean? So I love you for that. So thank you so much for your time.
You. Okay. All right. Well, listen, you take it easy.
You too. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you again, Jackie, for another amazing interview. And just want to say thank you very much for being honest and transparent about how important Black History Month is to you and why it should be important to everybody in America. If you have not listened to Miss Jackie Winter's first interview here on All Motion, please make sure you check it out. It's episode 10, part 1 and 2, Independent Women. Thank you all again for tuning in. Please be sure to access our new website at allinmotion.com, where you can locate all of our episodes and all of our content and our new newsletter that will be coming out. This is Jake from All Motion. Take care and be safe.